I would put music and some audio cues in this intro, but I don't have any. Sorry. So, you have a model with maybe 3 polygons and a face texture. Now that's my shit right there. I'm not the only one who grew up with this, and there are plenty of others who are much older than me who grew up with much less. Graphics technology in the gaming space has evolved since the days of the original PlayStation and Xbox. It used to be that rendering an entire 3D game world was the bleeding edge in the 90s, that programmable shaders were the absolute future in the 2000s, that having a picture of a dude on your character was the peak of realism, not knowing that an entire game's worth of polygons in those days would be the equivalent of a single character model in 2025, if not less. I wouldn't doubt it if you said a gun model in Mafia: The Old Country or Cyberpunk 2077 had more put into it than an entire level in the original Metal Gear Solid. When I was younger, the old frontier of 3D graphics tech was fascinating to say the least. The jump from the 5th generation to the 6th at their peaks was monumental. The same with going from the 6th to the 7th generation at their respective peaks. Here's Battlefield 1942 in 2002, compared to Battlefield 3 in 2011. As hardware improved, stylization took less of a seat as the years went by. Doom 3 pushed the limits of real-time shadows. Half-Life 2 pushed the limits of facial animations and physics. Crysis pushed the limits of, well, everything. And the gray and brown worlds of the modern military shooter dominated the latter half of the Xbox 360's dominance on pop culture. No longer would a face texture on a humanoid character suffice. Realism became the buzzword in AAA gaming's mind. The last time Naughty Dog made a Jak game was in 2005 with Jak X, as they set sights on targeting and perfecting this new direction. And I was excited! I would read every Digital Foundry article, watch comparison and frame rate analysis videos, and quietly champion the push into the direction of games looking less like baby stuff, but highly advanced CGI that you could play in real time at 30 frames per second or higher. The turning point for me was in 2011 with the introduction of Unreal Engine 3's Samaritan demo, a little glimpse into what was considered the future of what graphical fidelity could realistically present itself in a video game in the near future. Likely the next generation of consoles with the PS4 and next Xbox, then dubbed the Xbox 720 by the gaming community. With its dark and gritty sci-fi dystopia, neon lighting complete with lens flares, highly detailed character models and decals, expertly crafted animation work, and concise storytelling. I was 15 at the time, and being a teenager who grew up with 3 polygons with a face texture, this was hype. Finally, games were about to achieve CGI levels of fidelity you could play with a controller. A special effects clusterfuck you can play in real time. Faces were about to get closer to real human beings. Effects were going to be more explosive and detailed. Animations were going to be multifaceted, complex, and better. And game worlds were about to get bigger and open without the loss of graphical fidelity that usually came with that endeavor. Holy shit, this is going to be awesome! I'm on the edge of exiting my 20s as of writing this script, and one of my favorite games of all time is a game that lacks 3D modeling whatsoever, or a game that looks like an anime, or a game that's literally a visual novel from 2004, or Deus motherfucking Ex, the original.
Maybe you should try getting a job.
What happened? How can this be? Why? Why would I play Valhalla over an Assassin's Creed? Valhalla doesn't have ray tracing. Why would anyone be hyped for Silksong when it doesn't have ray tracing? Why am I still waiting for a new Deus Ex game? Why did I drop the new Indiana Jones game out of boredom? Why did I drop Alan Wake 2? I've never dropped a Remedy game before. They both have ray tracing. Why would I go outside and touch grass when it doesn't have ray tracing? It used to be that if your game looked vaguely like real life, I would pony up the cash, or in the case of my youth, my dad's credit card since I didn't have a job of my own back then. It certainly worked with BioShock Infinite, and it's one of the most disappointing pre-orders I've ever played. Graphics were a big part of my interest in games during my teen years, but now that I look back on it, It wasn't for the reasons I thought. While consciously I heralded the coming of real-time global illumination, realistic animations, movie-like character models, and abundance of effects and even motion blur, unconsciously, I was just fascinated by technology in general, pushing the limits of both hardware and software to achieve styles in convincing fashion. As a child, I loved the fact that Psychonauts 1 looked the way it looked. But what I didn't realize until adulthood wasn't that I loved Psychonauts for its technology, but rather for everything else the technology did to make it look and feel the way it looked and felt. People forget this, likely due to both time and its stylistic direction, but Psychonauts 1 was kind of a technical marvel in its own right for both the Xbox and PS2. More so for the PS2, as it had the weaker hardware. It wasn't trying to be Max Payne 2 or Half-Life 2 or Doom 3 in terms of pushing the envelope of realism on its platforms. It was trying to be a twisted-looking animated film that you could play, and you know what? The attempt at such a feat impresses me more in hindsight than the other examples because though it doesn't hit the level of fidelity of pre-rendered CGI of the time, as you'd expect from a Pixar or DreamWorks animation, the style nonetheless shines through, with each character and mental world you traverse being highly distinct from one another in spite of hardware limitations. Limits that, fast forward to its sequel nearly 2 decades later, wouldn't be present. Psychonauts 2 is a phenomenal looking game, with gorgeous worlds well realized with more modern technology, as flawed as it can be at times. I also wasn't impressed by it like I was with the original. Not because it doesn't look great, or that its world isn't built like a brick shithouse, but when you get down to it, it's not that impressive. Sure, it runs in high definition at 60 frames or better, but there are other games now that go for a cartoony art style that do it just as good, or better on the same hardware. Psychonauts is no longer unique in this aspect. That begs the question. What do I think about games that aim for realism today? Well, we certainly surpassed the Samaritan demo. In fact, we surpassed so far from that demo that I don't really care anymore. Same thing with the 2012 E3 demo of Watch Dogs. I was so hyped for that game based on how the demo looked and presented itself that I even showed my dad the footage with excitement, much to his indifference in the grand scheme of things. To this day, I've yet to actually play Watch Dogs despite having numerous chances to do so. Saying your game is trying to look realistic is like saying your car has air conditioning. It was valuable back when it was implemented the first time around, as flawed as the implementation was. Nowadays, you can literally download a game engine for free and create a little game within a day that, technologically, surpasses anything Halo 2 could have achieved on the original Xbox. The limitations aren't strictly hardware anymore, but your imagination. Yet AAA games still strive to put all their eggs on being the most realistic looking game in existence, even when such a push isn't sustainable. Black Ops Cold War isn't too far behind from Black Ops 6 within a 5-year split. Halo Infinite doesn't look much better than Halo 5. Far Cry 6 doesn't look that much better than 5 or even 4, and in some ways is inferior to Far Cry 2 from 2008. Even upcoming games like Grand Theft Auto 6, while impressive visually, and seek to finally match or surpass the future we were promised with the Matrix Awakens demo, is still something that has clearly taken a toll on its development staff to achieve. I guess when I was excited over the Samaritan demo or Battlefield 3's reveal trailer, it was less that I was excited for games to look real, but the fascination of a time when games will look less like this, or even this, and look more like something an industry-grade computer would render in the 1990s or early 2000s for a film. That future is already here. AAA games today can match or look better than the original Toy Story. It doesn't change the fact that one of my favorite games of all time within the last 10 years is literal pixel art. I was browsing YouTube when it recommended the videos of One Threat Interactive, and got me curious as he's a vocal critic of Unreal Engine 5's notorious reputation of being unoptimized, ill-suited for lower-spec machines, and highly reliant on upscaling to pick up the slack for less attentive developers, which I agree on that aspect, though I'd argue that's just modern AAA gaming in a nutshell. What inspired me to make this video isn't that he's wrong. What did was that if his channel is anything to go by, every other aspect about a game is secondary. That games aren't the sum of their design, direction, and craft, but the technology facilitating it. There was a time when I would have been obsessed with this whole discussion, and that time was when I still made anime reviews on a regular basis, aka my try-hard teenage years. That transition period when games started to look like the tech demos that promised a future during the late 2000s to early 2010s. It came, it continues, and frankly, I think games look good enough the way they are now. They certainly aren't just 3 polygons with a face texture anymore. Now that's considered a deliberate art style these days. There are ways to go with general polish for games aiming for realism, but if this is what we're hitting, it's good enough for me. I don't need any more. Hell, I was impressed with Half-Life Alyx's faces. I don't need anything further. Because why not make an animated movie you could play? Why not make your game look like it came from the Nintendo DS? Why not make a highly polished visual novel? Why not make a great side-scrolling platformer? Hell, why not make a game made of abstract shapes like Thomas Was Alone? Why risk going into the uncanny valley at all? Because of marketing? It's marketing, isn't it? Yeah, I guess, but considering the popularity of Minecraft, I doubt it's the only reason. Your average Joe wants their money's worth, especially in this economy. I get that. And technology pushing behemoths likely do just that for them, and not all results are depressing. I love Cyberpunk 2077 in part due to its fidelity, but it's also because it uses said fidelity to portray a larger-than-life sci-fi dystopia that is one part up my ass to my general cyberpunk-loving sensibilities, but also to explore themes a game of lesser visual quality wouldn't be able to fully realize, especially with the Phantom Liberty expansion. That's an example of technology fueling anything resembling artistic credulity. I wouldn't have attached myself to the world the same way if the game looked like it came from Nintendo 64. And yet, I would happily play it on the Switch too, which is far from being the best version. Because hey, if it looks like Cyberpunk 2077, and it isn't the last generation version at launch, it's good enough for me. I grew up with worse. As much as technology intrigues me then and now, it's never fun to want your game to look like the very place you're trying to keep your mind off of. Yet, it's what sells in the AAA space. It's sad, really, when you think about it. All that effort to make a $70 or $80 game look real when going outside is free. Why would you want your game to look like real life at all if it's not for any reason artistically driven, but marketing driven? It takes a creative mind to reproduce real life. It takes an even more creative mind not to. As I've gotten older and as sheer graphical fidelity has gotten better and better, I no longer truly care about graphics as much as I truly care about the experience behind it. I think graphics still matter, just not in the same way as before. You can have a shiny turd with the latest technology as much as you can have a diamond made out of pixel art. You can keep that shiny turd. I'm perfectly happy with my pixelated diamond.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, god damn it. What? I don't like it. Don't like what? The whole like, comment, and subscribe thing. Feels like I'm, I don't know, kicking a puppy or something. Nonsense! Don't you want to grow your platform? I guess, but good. Now say like, comment, and subscribe. You piss off.